Because I refused to renovate my beach house for my daughter's wedding, she and her fiancé convinced me I was too old to maintain it and pressured me to sell, never suspecting I already owned the luxury venue they'd been desperate to book for years. The look on their faces when they discovered who their new landlord was? Priceless. It's strange how 30 years of memories can suddenly feel like they're slipping through your fingers. This beach house, my sanctuary, my greatest investment, my dream realized, had been my home since Thomas passed away 12 years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. We'd bought it as a fixer-upper in our 40s, spending weekends and holidays transforming it from a weather-beaten cabin into the elegant coastal retreat it is now. Every nail, every brush stroke of paint, every carefully selected piece of furniture had been our labor of love. The wraparound deck where I now sat was the last project Thomas and I completed together before his diagnosis. I ran my hand along the smooth wooden railing, remembering how his strong hands had sanded each board until it was perfect. Mom? Mom? Are you even listening? My daughter Vanessa's voice cut through my thoughts, sharp and impatient. I'm sorry, dear. Just lost in thought. I smiled, turning to face her and her fiancé, Elliot, who hovered behind her like a shadow. What were you saying? Vanessa sighed dramatically. We were talking about using the house for the wedding rehearsal dinner. It would save us a fortune not having to rent a space. Oh. I hesitated, looking out at my carefully tended garden. The thought of 60 people trampling through my space, rearranging my furniture, treating my home like a venue made my stomach tighten. I don't think that would work well, honey. The house isn't really set up for large gatherings. Vanessa's expression hardened instantly. It's literally on the beach with a massive deck and open floor plan. It's perfect. But where would everyone park? The driveway only fits 4 cars. They could park at the public lot and walk over. It's not that far. And the neighbors, Mom! Vanessa cut me off. This is my wedding. Do you have any idea how much we're already spending? The Seacliff Pavilion is costing us a fortune just for the ceremony and reception. Ah, the Seacliff Pavilion. The exclusive oceanfront venue that had been booked solid for 3 years. Vanessa had been ecstatic when a cancellation opened up a date that worked for them. What she didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that I had purchased the pavilion through my investment company 7 years ago, after Thomas died. The insurance money, combined with our savings, had given me a substantial sum to invest, and the pavilion had proven to be remarkably profitable. I kept my ownership quiet, employing a management company to run day-to-day operations. I visited, occasionally, introduced simply as Margaret, an investor, when I stopped by. I loved seeing the beautiful celebrations, the joy it brought people, all while remaining anonymous. It was exactly how I preferred things, successful but private. Elliot stepped forward, always quick to support Vanessa. We're just trying to be practical, Margaret. It would really help us out. I looked at them both, my beautiful, accomplished daughter and her fiancé, both successful attorneys at the same firm. They made more money than I ever had as a high school librarian. Yet somehow I was always the one expected to help out. I'm sorry, I said gently but firmly. I just don't think it would work. But I'm happy to contribute more toward the reception. If that would help? Vanessa's face flushed. It's not about the money, Mom. It's about making this special. This is supposed to be the most important day of my life. I bit back a comment about it being the most important day of her life until her next wedding. Vanessa's first marriage had lasted all of 18 months. Thomas and I had spent a small fortune on that celebration, too. Let me think about it, I offered, hoping to end the conversation. Later that evening, after they had gone back to their downtown condo, I walked through my house, touching the familiar surfaces, looking at photographs of happier times. There was one of Vanessa as a child, building sandcastles with Thomas. One from her college graduation, her face beaming with pride as I stood beside her. More recent photos were scarce. Vanessa visited less frequently these days, usually only when she wanted something. My phone pinged with a text. It was an update from Ricardo, the manager at the pavilion, confirming some details about an upcoming charity event I'd helped organize. I smiled, remembering the beautiful evening last year when the venue had hosted a fundraiser for the literacy program I'd started after retirement. No one there knew I owned the place. I was just Margaret, the retired librarian who loved books and children. I'd built a good life in the 12 years since Thomas died. My beach house, my volunteer work, my small circle of close friends, and my quiet investment in the pavilion. I had created it all myself, carefully balancing privacy with purpose. Taki. Following weekend, Vanessa and Elliot returned with reinforcements. Her future in-laws, Bernard and Carolyn, sat stiffly on my comfortable sofa, looking around my home with appraising eyes. "It's quite quaint," Carolyn said, in a tone that suggested this wasn't a compliment. "But I can see why Vanessa thinks it would be charming for a casual rehearsal dinner." "We would handle everything," Vanessa assured me. "You wouldn't have to lift a finger. We'd even pay for a hotel room for you that night so you wouldn't have to deal with the cleanup." "A hotel room? In my own town?" The suggestion stung more than I cared to admit. "This is my home, Vanessa." "Mom, be reasonable. We're talking about one night." Elliot cleared his throat. "Actually, Margaret, we've been wanting to talk to you about something else, too." He glanced at Vanessa, who nodded encouragingly. "We've noticed the stairs are getting pretty steep for you, and maintaining this place must be a lot of work on your own." "I manage just fine," I said, feeling a chill settle over me. Bernard leaned forward. "Property values in this area are at an all-time high right now. If you were to sell, you could get a very comfortable condo in that new retirement community they're building inland." "A retirement community?" I repeated, stunned. "I'm only 63. "It's not just for old people, Mom," Vanessa said quickly. "It's for active seniors. They have a pool and social events." "I have a pool," I replied, my voice tightening. "The ocean. And I have friends." Carolyn patted my hand. "We're just concerned about you. All alone in this big house. What if you fell? What if there was a storm?" I looked at the four of them, seeing for the first time the unified front they presented. This wasn't a spontaneous conversation. They had planned this, discussed it among themselves before approaching me. A heavy realization settled in my chest. My daughter didn't see me as capable or independent. In her eyes, I was already diminished, needing to be managed. As they continued listing reasons why selling would be for my own good, I found myself wondering what Thomas would say if he were here. He'd probably remind me that we had built this life for ourselves, not for Vanessa. He'd remind me that I was stronger than they knew. What none of them realized, what they couldn't possibly know, was that the quiet, accommodating mother they thought they knew had been making multi-million-dollar business decisions for years. The Seacliff Pavilion was just the beginning. I owned 3 other properties through my investment company, all managed by professionals who respected my business acumen while maintaining my privacy. I hadn't shared this side of my life with Vanessa. After Thomas died, she had been so quick to try to help me with financial decisions that I'd found it easier to simply let her believe I was living comfortably but modestly on Thomas's life insurance and my teacher's pension. The truth was far more interesting. But sitting there, watching them plan my diminished future without my input, I wondered if perhaps it was time for a change after all, just not the one they had in mind. 3 days after the ambush meeting with Vanessa and the Prescotts, I was reviewing quarterly reports from my property management company when my doorbell rang. It was nearly 8 o'clock in the evening. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find Vanessa standing there alone this time. She held a thick, manila folder in one hand and an expensive bottle of Cabernet in the other. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Mom," she said, offering the wine with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I thought we could talk. Just us." Something in her tone made me wary, but I stepped aside to let her in. "Of course, honey. Is everything all right with the wedding plans?" "Everything's fine," she replied, setting the folder on my coffee table with a small thud. "I brought some information I think you should see." I poured us each a glass of wine, though I noticed Vanessa barely touched hers. She was too busy spreading brochures across my coffee table. "So, after our conversation the other day, I did some research. This is Bayview Gardens," she said, pushing a glossy brochure toward me. "It's that retirement community I mentioned. They have a 2-bedroom unit available now with a small patio. It's perfect for you." I picked up the brochure reluctantly. The cover showed smiling gray-haired couples playing golf and gathered around restaurant tables. Inside were floor plans for various units, all sterile and identical, with none of the character of my lovingly renovated home. "Vanessa, I appreciate your concern, but—" "There's more," she interrupted, pulling out another document. "I had Elliot run the numbers on what your house might sell for in the current market." I felt my jaw tighten. "You had your fiancé assess my home's value without asking me first?" Waved away my objection. "Mom, he's just being helpful. Look at these figures. You're sitting on a gold mine here. Beachfront property like this? You could sell today and have more than enough to buy into Bayview Gardens outright, plus a significant amount to invest for your future." I set down the brochure. "What future do you imagine I'm planning for exactly? I'm 63, not 93. I'm healthy, I'm active, and I love my home." Vanessa sighed. "Mom, be practical. This house is too much for you. The property taxes alone must be crushing you. And the maintenance? I manage just fine," I said more sharply than I intended. "My finances are in order, Vanessa." She reached across the table and took my hand in hers. "I know this is hard. You and Dad love this place, but he's been gone 12 years now, Mom. Don't you think it's time to move on? Start fresh?" Something about her tone, so condescending as if she were speaking to a child, made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. "I have moved on, in my own way. This house is part of my fresh start." Vanessa straightened, her expression hardening slightly. "Mom, I need to be honest with you. Elliot and I are hoping to buy a place in Seacliff Heights. The school district is excellent, and we're thinking about starting a family soon." The exclusive neighborhood she mentioned was well beyond what even 2 attorneys could reasonably afford without significant help. Suddenly, I understood exactly where this conversation was heading. "The thing is," she continued, not noticing my silence, "we're a bit short on the down payment. If you were to sell this place, you could help us. It would be an investment in your future grandchildren." And there it was, the real reason behind all this sudden concern for my well-being. "I see," I said quietly. "It's not just about us," Vanessa added quickly. "This house is going to become a burden for you. The stairs, the upkeep, and what happens if there's a major repair needed? The roof, the foundation? These old beachfront properties can have all sorts of problems." I almost laughed. "Thomas had insisted on rebuilding the foundation when we renovated, knowing the coastal conditions. The roof had been replaced just 5 years ago with top-quality materials. I supervised these projects personally, learning everything I needed to know about construction in the process. Those skills had proven invaluable when I began investing in commercial properties. "I'm not worried about repairs," I said simply. Vanessa pulled out another document, this one from a real estate agency. "I took the liberty of having someone come by and look at the place from the outside. They've prepared a preliminary listing agreement." She pushed it toward me along with a pen. "All you need to do is sign and they'll handle everything." I stared at the paper, stunned by her audacity. You had my home assessed without my permission? Mom, we're just trying to help. By going behind my back? My voice was dangerously quiet now. By making decisions about my home, my life, without even consulting me? By having strangers look at my property? Vanessa had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I knew you'd be resistant. Change is hard. But this is for the best, Mom. You'll... See? I picked up the listing agreement, my fingers tightening around the paper. And what makes you so certain you know what's best for me? She leaned forward, her expression earnest. Because I love you. Because I want you to be safe and cared for. And honestly, Mom, because I've noticed you getting more forgetful lately. You missed your dental appointment last month, remember? And you couldn't find your car keys when we were supposed to go to lunch. So I'm not just old, I'm senile now? I could feel anger rising in my chest. Not senile. She backpedaled quickly. Just, maybe not as sharp as you used to be. It happens to everyone. I stood up, gathering the papers into a neat stack. Vanessa, I think it's time for you to go. Mom, please, just look over the information. I'll think about it, I said. Not because I would, but because I needed her to leave before I said something I might regret. After she left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by brochures for a life I didn't want, simmering with a fury I hadn't felt in years. The audacity, the presumption, the complete disregard for my autonomy, it was breathtaking. And in that moment, looking down at the listing agreement with its presumptuous claims about my home's value, significantly undervalued, I noted, something shifted inside me. A decision crystallized, clear and sharp. It was time to show my daughter exactly who she was dealing with. I didn't sleep that night. As dawn broke over the ocean, casting pink light across my bedroom walls, I was already dressed and sipping my second cup of coffee on the deck. The tide was coming in, waves crashing against the shore with increasing force. I felt like those waves, gathering power, preparing to break. I pulled out my phone and called Ricardo, the manager at the Seacliff Pavilion. Margaret, good morning. Is everything all right? You never call this early. Everything's fine, Ricardo. I'd like to stop by this morning if that works for you. There are some things I need to discuss. Of course, I'll be here all day. The Henderson. Wedding is this weekend, so we're prepping, but I always have time for you. 2 hours later, I was walking through the grand entrance of the Seacliff Pavilion. The soaring ceilings, the wall of windows overlooking the ocean, the elegant staircase, curving up to the mezzanine, it never failed to take my breath away. The fact that I owned this beautiful space still felt surreal sometimes. Ricardo greeted me with a warm hug. Unlike most people in my life, he knew exactly who I was, both the quiet librarian and the savvy businesswoman. When I purchased the pavilion, he'd been a junior manager. I'd seen his potential immediately and promoted him to general manager within a year. He'd never let me down. What brings you in today? He asked, leading me to his office. I settled into a chair and took a deep breath. My daughter's wedding. It's scheduled here for June 15th. Recognition dawned on his face. Vanessa Edwards? That's your daughter? I had no idea. She doesn't know I own this place, I said. I've kept my investments private from my family, but circumstances have changed, and I need to consider my options. Ricardo's expression turned serious. Whatever you need, Margaret. You know that. I filled him in on Vanessa's attempt to pressure me into selling my home, carefully omitting my more emotional reactions. Ricardo listened attentively, asking occasional clarifying questions. So, he concluded when I finished, you want to use your position as owner to do what exactly? I paused, considering. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I need to see the contract for Vanessa's wedding, and I'd like to be more involved in the planning process moving forward. Ricardo nodded, pulling up the file on his computer. They've booked our premium package. Ms. Prescott, Elliot's mother, has been the primary contact. She's quite particular. I smiled thinly. I can imagine. As I reviewed the contract details, something caught my eye. They've only put down the minimum deposit? The balance is due just 2 weeks before the event? Ricardo nodded. That's standard. For our premium bookings. Is there a problem? Not yet, I said. But there might be. After leaving the pavilion, I drove to my attorney's office. Barbara Chen had handled all my business affairs since Thomas died. She was brilliant, discreet, and had become a trusted friend. Over lunch, I explained my situation. Barbara listened, without interrupting, her expression neutral until I finished speaking. Let me make sure I understand, she said, setting down her fork. Your daughter and her fiancé are pressuring you to sell your home so they can use the proceeds to buy a house they can't afford. Meanwhile, they're planning an extravagant wedding at your venue, not knowing you own it. And you want to teach them a lesson? I want them to respect me, I said simply. Not as just their aging mother who needs looking after, but as a person. With agency and intelligence, Barbara nodded thoughtfully. All right. What do you have in mind? I'm considering selling my house, I said. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. But, I continued, not to move into that awful retirement complex. I've been thinking about downsizing anyway. This could be an opportunity to find something that better suits my current lifestyle. And the proceeds? That's where I need your advice. If I sell, I want to protect my assets. I don't want Vanessa to have access to the money or to know exactly how much I received. Barbara smiled. That's easily arranged. We can set up a trust or route the proceeds through your existing business structure. Good. And there's something else. I leaned forward. I want to see how far they're willing to go with this wedding. If they're spending money they don't have, expecting me to bail them out by selling my house. You want to let them dig the hole deeper, Barbara finished for me. Exactly. By the time I left Barbara's office, we had outlined a plan. It wasn't about revenge. I loved my daughter despite her current behavior. It was about boundaries and truth. It was about showing her who I really was, not who she thought I was. That evening, Vanessa called. I let it go to voicemail, listening to her message later. Mom, I just wanted to check in about those materials I left. I know it's a lot to process, but Elliot's realtor friend says the market is hot right now. We could have your house listed by next week. Call me back when you get a chance. The casual presumption in her voice made my decision easier. I texted her back. I've been thinking about what you said. You might be right about the house being too much for me. Let's talk more. Can you and Elliot come for dinner this weekend? Her response was immediate. Really? That's great, Mom. We'll be there Saturday at 6. I'll bring more information about Bayview Gardens. Perfect. I replied, already mapping out my strategy. The next day, I contacted a realtor, not Elliot's friend, but a woman I knew through my investment group who specialized in high-end coastal properties. Sophie arrived at my house that afternoon, her assessment of my property far more thorough and higher than the one Vanessa had procured. Margaret, this place is incredible, Sophie said, walking through my renovated kitchen with its panoramic ocean views. The market for properties like this is red hot right now. You could name your price within reason and likely get it. What about a quick sale? If I wanted to move within, say, 2 months? Even better. I have several clients looking for exactly this kind of property who could pay cash and close quickly. She looked at me curiously. Are you sure you want to sell? This place is paradise. I smiled. I'm sure it's time for a change, but I have some conditions about the sale that might seem unusual. By Saturday, everything was in motion. I prepared Thomas's favorite meal, grilled salmon with dill sauce, roasted vegetables, and homemade bread, and set the table with our best china. This conversation deserved a proper setting. Vanessa and Elliot arrived promptly at 6, both looking pleased with themselves. Vanessa carried another folder of papers, while Elliot brought an expensive bottle of champagne. "To new beginnings," he said, handing it to me with a wink. If only they knew what kind of beginning I had in mind. "I have some news," I announced, as I set the dessert, Thomas's favorite key lime pie, on the table. Vanessa and Elliot exchanged glances, barely containing their excitement. They thought they knew what was coming. "I've decided to sell the house," I said, keeping my voice steady. Vanessa clapped her hands together. "Mom, that's wonderful. I knew you'd see reason once you had time to think it through. I've already spoken with a realtor. She thinks we can get the house on the market within 2 weeks and close quickly," I continued, ignoring her condescension. Elliot leaned forward eagerly. "That's fantastic, Margaret. My friend Jackson can draw up the paperwork for you right away." "That won't be necessary," I said, taking a sip of wine. "I've already selected a realtor, Sophie Winters. She specializes in luxury beachfront properties." Vanessa's smile faltered slightly. "Mom, Elliot's friend would give you a discount on the commission. Why go with someone else?" "Because Sophie believes the house is worth substantially more than the estimate your friend provided," I said mildly. "Almost 30% more, in fact." Elliot coughed, nearly choking on his wine. That's impossible. Jackson is one of the top realtors in the area. Apparently not for properties like mine. I cut myself a slice of pie, enjoying their discomfort. Sophie already has several interested buyers who could pay cash and close within 60 days. "That's great news," Vanessa said, recovering quickly. "So you'll definitely have enough for a nice unit at Bayview Gardens, with plenty left over to help with our down payment." I set my fork down carefully. "About that, I've been thinking about what you said about my future, and you're right. I should be planning more carefully." Vanessa beamed. "Exactly. And with the proceeds from the house, I won't be moving to Bayview Gardens," I interrupted. "I've found a lovely cottage about 20 minutes inland. It's smaller than this place, but has a beautiful garden and is walking distance to town." "But Mom," Vanessa protested, "Bayview Gardens has medical staff on site. It's safer." "I'm perfectly healthy," I reminded her, "and the cottage is part of a small community with security patrols and a neighborhood watch. I'll be quite safe." Elliot cleared his throat. "Margaret, we really think Bayview would be better. And, well, we were counting on your help with the down payment for our house." I looked at him steadily. "I never agreed to that, Elliot." "But you said," Vanessa began. "I said I was selling my house. I never said I was giving you the money." I paused, letting that sink in. "However, I have been thinking about ways to help with your wedding." This instantly brightened their mood. "Really? That would be amazing, Mom." "Yes, I understand you've booked the Seacliff Pavilion. It's a beautiful venue." "It's perfect," Vanessa gushed. "A bit over our budget, honestly, but Carolyn insisted. The problem is they require the balance to be paid 2 weeks before the event, and it's substantial." "How substantial?" I asked, though I knew exactly how much they owed. "Almost $60,000, Elliot admitted, looking uncomfortable. "We put the deposit on my credit card, but the balance—" I widened my eyes in feigned surprise. "That seems excessive for a wedding venue." "It includes everything," Vanessa explained. "The catering, the flowers, the open bar, the band, the works. It's the premium package." "I see." I took another bite of pie. "And how were you planning to pay for this? Even with both your salaries, that's a significant expense." Vanessa and Elliot exchanged another look. "Well," Vanessa said hesitantly, "we were hoping that with the proceeds from your house—" "So let me understand," I said, my voice still calm. "You expected me to sell my home, move into a retirement community, and give you enough money to both buy a house in Seacliff Heights and pay for an extravagant wedding." They had the grace to look embarrassed. "No, not exactly," Elliot started. We thought you'd want to help," Vanessa cut in. That's what parents do, right? They help their children. I studied my daughter's face. When had she become this person? Entitled? Presumptuous? Seeing me only as a means to an end? I remembered her as a child, fiercely independent, always wanting to do things herself. No help, Mommy, she'd say, concentrating intensely on tying her shoes or building a tower. Somewhere along the way, that spirit had twisted into something else. I raised you to be self-sufficient, Vanessa, I said quietly. Your father and I worked hard for everything we had. We didn't expect handouts from anyone. This isn't a handout, she protested. It's family helping family. Is it? I asked. Because from where I sit, it seems like you've been planning to use me as your personal ATM. You didn't ask if I needed help or what I wanted. You simply decided what was best for me and expected me to fall in line. That's not fair, Elliot interjected. Isn't it? I looked at him coolly. You were quite eager to have your friend undervalue my property, Elliot. I wonder why that might be. The color drained from his face. That's not... Jackson wouldn't... I think we're getting off track, Vanessa said quickly. Mom, we just want what's best for you. And yes, we could use some help with the wedding and the house. Is that so wrong? I sighed. No, it's not wrong to ask for help. It's wrong to manipulate and pressure someone into giving it. We weren't... You were, I said firmly. But that's not important now. What matters is that I've made my decision. I'm selling my house, buying the cottage, and the rest of the proceeds will be managed by my financial advisor. But the wedding, Vanessa began. I'll help with the wedding, I said, watching relief wash over their faces. But not in the way you're expecting. I'd like to meet with you at the Seacliff Pavilion next week to discuss the details. Why there? Elliot asked, confused. I smiled. You'll see. After they left, I sat alone on my deck, listening to the waves crash against the shore. The moon cast a silver path across the water, and for a moment, I could almost feel Thomas beside me, his warm hand covering mine. Am I doing the right thing? I whispered to the night air. The wind picked up slightly, rustling through the sea. Grass. I took it as an answer. The truth was, I wasn't just selling my house to teach Vanessa a lesson. I was doing it because it was time. This place held precious memories, but it also kept me tethered to the past. The cottage I'd found was charming and more practical for a single woman my age. It had a studio space where I could finally pursue painting, something I'd put off for decades. Vanessa didn't know about that dream. She didn't know a lot of things about me, but she was about to find out. The week passed in a flurry of activity. Sophie brought 3 potential buyers through my house, all of whom made offers significantly above asking price. I accepted the highest bid from a lovely couple with 2 small children who fell in love with the property immediately. They could close in 45 days and were willing to let me set the moving date. Meanwhile, I spent hours on the phone with Barbara, finalizing the details of our plan. I also made several visits to the cottage I was purchasing, meeting with contractors about minor renovations I wanted before moving in. Through it all, Vanessa called daily, peppering me with questions about the house sale and when she might expect her portion of the proceeds. I kept my answers vague and redirected the conversation to our upcoming meeting at the Seacliff Pavilion. The night before that meeting, I found myself unable to sleep again. I paced through my soon-to-be former home, touching familiar walls, standing in doorways, remembering. In the study, I opened the bottom drawer of Thomas's old desk and pulled out a leather-bound journal, his final gift to me before he died. Write your truth, he'd told me. Don't let others define your story. I hadn't written in it yet. Somehow it had felt too final, too much like accepting he was gone. But tonight, I sat at his desk and opened the pristine pages. For hours, I wrote everything. My feelings about Vanessa's behavior, my fears about her reaction to tomorrow's revelation, my hopes for our relationship moving forward. When I finally closed the journal, the sky was beginning to lighten. I felt drained, but clear-headed. What I was about to do would change my relationship with my daughter forever. Was I prepared for that? I thought about Vanessa as a child, her infectious laugh, her curiosity, her determination. I remembered teaching her to read, watching her face light up as stories came alive in her mind. I remembered her college graduation, how proud Thomas and I had been as she accepted her diploma. Where had that compassionate, thoughtful young woman gone? Had she always had this streak of entitlement, and I'd been too blind to see it? Or had something changed her? These questions swirled in my mind as I showered and dressed. Looking in the mirror, I saw not the feeble old woman Vanessa seemed to think I was, but a confident, capable individual with decades of wisdom and experience. I chose my outfit carefully, a tailored navy pantsuit that conveyed authority without being intimidating, paired with my favorite pearl earrings, a gift from Thomas on our 25th anniversary. "You can do this," I told my reflection. "It's time." I arrived at the Seacliff Pavilion 30 minutes early. Ricardo met me at the entrance, concern evident on his face. "Are you sure about this, Margaret?" he asked quietly. "I've thought about it from every angle," I assured him. "It's the right thing to do." He nodded, leading me to the private conference room we'd arranged for the meeting. "I've set everything up as you requested. Ms. Chen is already here." Barbara rose as I entered, her calm presence immediately reassuring. "Everything's in order," she said, handing me a folder. "The documents just need your signature." I reviewed the papers carefully, then signed each one with deliberate strokes. There was no going back now. At precisely noon, Ricardo showed Vanessa and Elliot into the room. They looked confused to find Barbara there, and even more confused by the formal setting. "Mom, what's going on?" Vanessa asked, eyeing Barbara suspiciously. "Why is your lawyer here?" "Please, sit down," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from us. "This is about the wedding, as I mentioned." Elliot frowned. "I don't understand. Why meet here? And why with a lawyer?" "All will become clear," I said. "But first, I'd like you to meet someone else." I pressed a button on the intercom, and moments later, Ricardo entered with an elegant woman in her 50s. "This is Amanda Prescott," I said, "Elliot's mother." "We know who she is, Mom," Vanessa said, clearly annoyed. "But why is she here?" Amanda looked equally perplexed. "Margaret, I didn't realize you'd be here. Elliot said this was a meeting with the venue manager about some contract details." "In a way it is," I said. "Amanda, please join us." Once everyone was seated, I took a deep breath. "I've asked you all here because there's something you should know before we proceed any further with the wedding plans or the sale of my house." I pulled out a document from the folder Barbara had given me and slid it across the table. "This is the ownership certificate for the Seacliff Pavilion." Elliot picked it up, scanning it quickly. His eyes widened. "I don't understand. This says the owner is Coastal Horizon Investments." "Yes," I confirmed. "That's my company." Silence fell over the room as 3 pairs of eyes stared at me in disbelief. "Your company?" Vanessa repeated slowly. "What are you talking about?" "After your father died," I explained, "I invested his life insurance money in several properties. The Seacliff Pavilion was my first acquisition. I've owned it for 7 years now." Elliot's jaw literally dropped. "You own this place? The most exclusive wedding venue on the coast?" "I do." I turned to Amanda. "That's why I wanted you here, Amanda. As the person who's been coordinating with the venue, you should know who you're actually doing business with." Amanda's perfectly composed face showed a rare crack of surprise. I had no idea, Margaret. All this time, when we've been discussing the wedding details, I knew. I said simply. But I kept my ownership private, as I do with all my investments. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. So this whole time, while we've been stressing about the cost of this place, scraping together the deposit, you owned it? You let us struggle when you could have given us a discount. Or something? I looked at my daughter steadily. You never asked for my help, Vanessa. You told me you'd booked this venue, but you never once mentioned having difficulty affording it. The first I heard about any financial concerns was when you tried to pressure me into selling my house. This is unbelievable, Elliot muttered, running a hand through his hair. You've been keeping secrets from us. Not secrets, Elliot. Privacy. There's a difference. I turned back to Vanessa. The reason I've brought you all here today is to discuss the wedding contract. Barbara slid another document across the table. We've prepared a revised agreement for the venue rental. Vanessa looked at it suspiciously. What does this mean? It means, I said carefully, that as the owner of this venue, I'm offering you a choice. Option 1, I provide the venue at cost, no markup, just the actual expenses for food, staff, and services. This would reduce your bill by approximately 40%. Hope flashed across Vanessa's face. Really? You'd do that? Option 2, I continued as if she hadn't spoken, is that you receive the full wedding experience you've contracted for at full price, but with one change to the payment terms. What change? Elliot asked cautiously. The remaining balance would be due in full by the end of this month, rather than 2 weeks before the wedding. That's impossible, Vanessa exclaimed. We can't come up with that kind of money in 2 weeks. Those are the options, I said calmly. A significantly reduced price with a reasonable payment schedule, or the full package with accelerated payment. Vanessa stared at me, realization dawning slowly across her face. This is about the house, isn't it? You're punishing us. No, Vanessa. I'm teaching you something about respect and assumptions. You assumed I was a helpless old woman who needed your guidance. You assumed my resources were yours to direct. You were wrong on both counts. You can't do this, Vanessa said, her voice rising. We have a contract. Barbara leaned forward slightly. The contract includes a clause allowing the venue to modify payment terms with 30 days' notice. You're receiving that notice today. Elliot flipped frantically through the paperwork. This is perfectly legal, Barbara finished. For him. As attorneys, I'm sure you both understand the binding nature of contracts. Amanda Prescott, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. I don't understand, Margaret. Why not simply tell them you owned the venue from the beginning? I turned to her with a sad smile. Would it have made a difference, Amanda? Would any of you have seen me differently, as a successful business owner rather than just Elliot's aging future mother-in-law? No one answered. The silence was telling. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Now, I'll leave you to discuss your options. Ricardo will be available if you have questions about the venue specifics. I stood, gathering my purse. Barbara, shall we? Mom, wait, Vanessa called as we reached the door. You can't just drop this bomb and walk away. I paused, turning back to face my daughter. I'm not walking away, Vanessa. I'm giving you space to consider your priorities. Call me when you've made your decision. Outside in the parking lot, the coastal breeze caught my hair as I took my first deep breath in what felt like hours. Are you all right? Barbara asked, genuine concern in her voice. I will be, I assured her. That was harder than I expected. You did well. Very composed. Thank you for being there. I couldn't have done it without you. As I drove home along the coastal highway, a strange lightness filled my chest. The secret I'd carried for so long was finally out. Whether or not Vanessa could accept it, I had reclaimed my narrative. The house was quiet when I returned. I kicked off my shoes and made a cup of tea, carrying it out to the deck. The afternoon sun glittered across the water, and pelicans dove for fish nearby. I would miss this view, I realized. But the cottage waiting for me had its own charms. Mature oak trees, a bubbling creek, morning fog that turned the surrounding hills mystical. My phone rang several times that evening. First Amanda, then Elliot, and finally Vanessa. I let them all go to voicemail, not yet ready for those conversations. Instead, I poured a glass of wine and continued sorting through my belongings, deciding what to take to my new home and what to leave behind. In the midst of organizing Thomas's old books, I found a photo album I hadn't looked at in years. Inside were pictures from the early days of our marriage, Thomas and me standing proudly in front of our first tiny apartment, camping trips in the mountains, parties with friends long lost to time or distance. There was one of me at 28, sitting at an easel, paintbrush in hand, face intense with concentration. Thomas had believed in my artistic talent long before I did. "You have a gift," he'd always said. "Don't let it go to waste." But then life happened. Career demands, raising. Vanessa, caring for my parents in their final years, my painting had been set aside. The cottage I'd bought had a sunroom perfect for a studio. Perhaps it wasn't too late to rediscover that part of myself. The next morning, I awoke to a text from Vanessa. "We need to talk. Can we come over at noon?" I replied with a simple, "Yes." While waiting, I continued packing, wrapping cherished objects in bubble wrap and placing them carefully in boxes. By 11:30, the kitchen was almost completely packed, save for a few essential items I'd need until moving day. When the doorbell rang, I steeled myself before answering. Vanessa stood alone on the porch, her expression unreadable. "No, Elliot?" I asked, stepping aside to let her in. "I thought we should talk, just us." She paused, taking in the boxes stacked in the hallway. "So you're really going through with it? Selling the house?" "Yes. The buyers are a lovely family. 2 children. They'll fill this place with new memories." Vanessa wandered into the living room, fingers trailing over familiar furniture. "I grew up here." "You did. It was a wonderful home for our family. Why?" Turned to face me. "Why didn't you ever tell me? About the pavilion, your business, any of it?" I considered my answer carefully. "After your father died, you were so concerned about me. You wanted to help with everything, my finances, my schedule, my future. It was easier to let you think I was just living on my pension and insurance money than to constantly defend my decisions. So you lied to me. I kept parts of my life private. There's a difference." Vanessa sank onto the sofa. "All this time, I thought you needed me. I do need you, Vanessa, as my daughter, not as my caretaker or financial advisor." She stared out the window at the ocean. "Elliot and I talked until 3 in the morning, about the wedding, about what you did, everything. And we're taking option 1, the reduced cost for the venue." She met my eyes directly. "Not because we can't get the money for option 2, but because it's the sensible choice. The money we save can go toward our house down payment." I nodded, pleased by her practical decision, even if she felt the need to assert they could have afforded the alternative. "I think that's wise." "But Mom," she continued, "I need to know. Why did you agree to sell the house? If this was all about teaching us a lesson, why go through with it?" "Because it is time," I said simply. "This house has served its purpose in my life. I'm ready for something new, something that's just mine." "The cottage. Yes, it's perfect for this next chapter." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't see you. The real you. I was so busy trying to solve problems that didn't exist. I never asked what you actually wanted. We both made mistakes," I acknowledged. "I should have been more open with you about my life." "So what happens now?" she asked, wiping her eyes. "Now we move forward. The house sale closes in 6 weeks. Your wedding is in 4 months, and somewhere in between, we learn to see each other more clearly. Vanessa nodded slowly. Elliot is mortified, by the way. Finding out his future mother-in-law is essentially his boss's boss. He keeps worrying you'll fire the management company. I laughed. Ricardo does an excellent job. His position is quite secure. And Carolyn, Elliot's mother, she's beside herself. She can't decide whether to be embarrassed or to start telling all her friends she's practically related to the owner of the Seacliff Pavilion. She'll adapt, I said dryly. People generally do. Later, after Vanessa left, I sat at Thomas's desk again and opened his journal. I wrote about our conversation, about the tentative bridge we'd begun to rebuild. Then I closed the book and placed it in a box labeled studio, a promise to myself to keep writing in my new home. That evening, I began something I'd been putting off for weeks. I contacted a real estate agent in Seville, Spain, a city Thomas and I had visited once and fallen in love with. We had always talked about spending a month there someday, renting an apartment, living like locals. I'd like information on long-term vacation rentals, I told the agent, for this fall. Something in the old city, if possible. It was time to start checking items off my long-deferred bucket list. And if Vanessa truly wanted to know me better, perhaps she'd even join me there for a week. The future, for the first time in years, felt wide open with possibilities. The sale of my house closed more quickly than expected. The young family was eager to move in before the school year started, and I was ready to begin my new chapter. 6 weeks after listing the property, I signed the final paperwork in Barbara's office, officially transferring ownership of the beach house that had been my home for 3 decades. Congratulations, Barbara said, handing me a cashier's check for an amount that still made me blink twice when I looked at it. How does it feel? Surreal, I admitted. Also liberating. And the proceeds, as we discussed. 30% into my existing investment portfolio, 30% into a trust for my future needs, 20% for the cottage purchase and renovations, and the rest liquid for adventures. Barbara smiled. I like the sound of that. Thomas would approve. He would, I agreed. He always said we'd travel more after retirement. I'm finally going to do it, for both of us. As I drove away from Barbara's office, I took a detour to the beach house. No, not my house anymore. I parked across the street and sat in my car, looking at the familiar facade. The new owners had already started making changes. The front door, once a weathered blue, was now a cheerful yellow. The garden beds had been replanted with colorful annuals instead of my preferred native grasses. It stung a little, seeing those changes, but there was also a strange satisfaction in knowing the house would continue to be loved. As I sat there, the front door opened, and the young mother emerged, a toddler on her hip. She noticed me and waved hesitantly. I waved back, then started my car. It was time to go. My new cottage was 15 minutes inland, nestled in a small community of similar homes surrounding a central green space. Though more modest than my beach house, it had character, cedar shingles, a deep front porch, and those beautiful oak trees I'd fallen in love with. Most importantly, it had the sunroom I'd already begun transforming into an art studio. I'd moved in gradually over the past few weeks, bringing small carloads of possessions each time I visited. Today would be different. Today I would sleep here for the first time, officially making it my home. As I pulled into the driveway, my neighbor Susan appeared from her garden next door. "Moving day?" she called cheerfully. "The last of it," I confirmed. "The movers finished with the furniture yesterday. Let me know if you need any help unpacking. Or if you'd like company and a bottle of wine later." I smiled gratefully. "I might take you up on that." Inside, cardboard boxes waited in neat stacks, each labeled with its contents and destination. I moved through the cottage, opening windows, to let in the fresh air, arranging flowers I'd picked up at the market, making the space mine in small, deliberate ways. In the kitchen, I unpacked my favorite teacup, a handmade ceramic piece Thomas had bought for me at a craft fair. I filled the kettle and leaned against the counter, taking in my new surroundings while waiting for it to boil. The cottage kitchen was perhaps a third the size of my old one, but it felt right for me now. No more empty cabinets, no more spaces designed for a family that had dwindled to just one. Everything here was scaled to my current life, practical, accessible, but still beautiful. My phone pinged with a message from Vanessa. "How's moving day going? Need any help?" I texted back, "Almost done, just making tea and deciding where to start. Unpacking." Her response came quickly. "Elliot and I could come by this evening if you want an extra pair of hands." I considered the offer. Since our confrontation at the pavilion, things had been different between us, tentative but more honest. She'd stopped treating me like a fragile object needing protection. I'd started sharing more about my life, my thoughts, my plans. "That would be nice," I replied. "I'll order dinner." 6:30? Perfect. See you then. I spent the afternoon unpacking my bedroom and bathroom, making sure I'd have what I needed for my first night. Then I turned my attention to the studio. I'd saved this space for last, wanting to give it the time and energy it deserved. The sunroom faced east, capturing morning light perfectly. I'd had shelves built along one wall for supplies, and a contractor had installed a utility sink in the corner. An antique drafting table, another flea market find from years ago, stood by the window, waiting for inspiration. From a carefully labeled box, I removed my old easel, dusty from years of storage. Thomas had given it to me for our 5th anniversary. "So you'll make time for what you love," he'd said. I'd used it regularly back then, when we were young and time seemed unlimited. Then less and less as other priorities took over. I set it up by the window and stepped back, trying to see myself standing there again, brush in hand. Could I still do this? Did that creative part of me still exist after being neglected for so long? From another box, I pulled out a folder of sketches, work I'd done years ago that Thomas had carefully preserved. Looking at them now, I could see potential in the shaky lines, the uncertain compositions. Not masterpieces, but honest attempts. A beginning. I was arranging art supplies on the shelves when my phone rang. It was Ricardo from the pavilion. "Margaret, I hope I'm not disturbing you on moving day." "Not at all, what's up?" "We've had a situation develop with your daughter's wedding. Mrs. Prescott came in today wanting to make significant changes to the reception setup. Since you instructed us to treat this like any other event, I explained that major changes close to the date would incur additional fees." I closed my eyes briefly. Let me guess. She didn't take it well. She asked to speak to the owner. Ricardo's voice held a note of amusement. I told her I'd pass along the message. "What exactly does she want to change?" "Everything from the floor plan to the menu. She's bringing in additional guests and wants to upgrade the floral arrangements and add a champagne fountain." "I see." I sighed. "Has anyone calculated what these changes would cost?" "About $12,000 more than the original contract." I considered my options. I could step in as the owner and approve the changes without fees, a gesture of goodwill that might smooth relations with my future in-laws. Or I could maintain the boundaries I'd established and treat this like any other client situation. "Has Vanessa been consulted about these changes?" I asked finally. "Not that I'm aware of." Mrs. Prescott presented herself as the wedding coordinator. That made my decision easier. "Please tell Mrs. Prescott that the owner has reviewed her requests and the standard fees will apply. All changes must be approved by the bride and groom, as they are the contracting parties." "Will do," Ricardo said. "One more thing. She mentioned that she's now aware of your ownership and suggested there should be a family discount for these modifications." I almost laughed. "The family discount was already applied to the original contract. Please remind her of that." After hanging up, I returned to unpacking, but my mind kept circling back to the wedding situation. I'd need to talk to Vanessa about it before she arrived for dinner. This wasn't about asserting control or teaching lessons anymore. It was about establishing healthy boundaries going forward. As the afternoon light began to fade, I sat on my new front porch with a glass of wine, looking out at the community green where children played under the watchful eyes of parents. It was a different view from my ocean panorama, but peaceful in its own way. I could imagine myself here in the coming years, painting in the mornings, walking to the nearby shops in the afternoon, perhaps joining the book club Susan had mentioned. It wasn't the future I'd once envisioned with Thomas, but it was a future with purpose and possibility. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I had arrived here not despite my daughter's attempts to control my life, but because of them. Sometimes catalysts for change come from unexpected sources. At exactly 6:30, Vanessa's car pulled into my driveway. It was time to build this new relationship. Mother and daughter, both adults, both finding their way forward with newfound respect. "So that's the whole story with Carolyn," Vanessa said, setting down her wine glass. "She's been impossible since finding out you own the pavilion. One minute she's bragging to her friends about her connection to the owner, the next she's demanding special treatment because we're practically family." We were sitting on my new porch, dinner plates cleared, away enjoying the mild evening air. Elliot had gone inside to take a work call, leaving Vanessa and me alone. "Ricardo mentioned she wanted to make some significant changes," I said carefully. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "That's an understatement. She wants to invite 20 more people, upgrade everything, and completely rearrange what Elliot and I had planned. When I told her we couldn't afford the extra costs, she said, and I quote, 'But your mother owns the place. Surely she'll waive the fees.'" "And what did you tell her?" "I told her that business is business, and that you'd already been incredibly generous with the original discount." Vanessa looked at me uncertainly. Was that the right thing to say? I felt a surge of pride. That was exactly right. "It's strange," she continued, looking out at the darkening sky. "A month ago, I probably would have assumed the same thing, that you'd just wave a magic wand and make it all free because I asked. I didn't see you as, well, as a businesswoman. You saw me as Mom? Yes, just Mom, not Margaret the investor or property owner or any of those other parts of you." She turned to face me. "I'm sorry about that. We all do it with our parents to some extent," I said. "It's hard to see them as complete people with lives and dreams beyond their relationship to us." Vanessa nodded, slowly. "When did you start investing in properties? Was it really only after Dad died?" "The major investments? Yes. But your father and I had always been interested in real estate. We bought and sold a few small properties over the years. The beach house was actually our third home." I had no idea. There's a lot you don't know about that time in our lives. You were young, focused on school and friends, as you should have been. I smiled at a memory. "When you were in high school, your father and I renovated a small commercial building downtown. We did most of the work ourselves on weekends." "The old bookstore? The one that's a coffee shop now?" "That's the one. We bought it for almost nothing because it needed so much work. Sold it 3 years later for triple our investment." Vanessa looked stunned. "I remember you working on a building, but I thought you were just helping someone else." We didn't talk about it much. It was our little side project, our way of building. For the future, your father was always thinking ahead. "He would be proud of what you've done," Vanessa said softly. "The pavilion, the other properties, all of it." "I think so too." I reached for the bottle and refilled our glasses. When he died, I felt so lost. Investing gave me purpose, a way to use what he'd taught me and build something meaningful. "And I just saw you as a widow who needed taking care of," Vanessa said, her voice tinged with regret. "We both made assumptions," I reminded her. "But we're seeing each other more clearly now." Elliot returned, settling into the chair beside Vanessa. "Beautiful evening," he observed. "This place has a different kind of magic than the beach house." "It does?" I agreed. "It suits this phase of my life." "Speaking of phases," Vanessa said, "Elliot and I have been talking about the house we want to buy. We're thinking of scaling back our plans a bit." Elliot nodded. "Seacliff Heights is nice, but the mortgage would be crushing. We've found a great place in Oak Ridge that needs some work but has good bones." "Sounds familiar," I said, smiling. "Sometimes the places that need work turn out to be the best investments." "That's what we're hoping," Vanessa said. "We thought maybe, if you have time, you could look at it with us? Give us your opinion?" The request, so different from their previous presumptions about my finances, warmed my heart. I'd be happy, too. Our conversation drifted to other topics as night fell completely. When they finally left around 10, I stood in the doorway of my new home, watching their taillights disappear down the quiet street. Something had shifted between us, perhaps permanently. We were finding a new equilibrium, one based on mutual respect rather than outdated dynamics. The following weeks were a blur of activity as I settled into my new life. I established routines: morning walks around the neighborhood, afternoons in my studio, evenings reading on the porch or socializing with neighbors. Susan introduced me to several other residents, and soon I found myself with invitations to book clubs, garden committees, and community dinners. My studio became my sanctuary. At first, my attempts at painting were hesitant, almost timid. I started with simple watercolors, relearning techniques I'd once known well. Gradually, my confidence returned. I found myself losing track of time while working, sometimes painting through meals without noticing I was hungry. 3 weeks after moving in, I completed my first painting I felt truly proud of: a landscape of the oak trees visible from my studio window, their graceful branches dappled with morning light. I propped it on the mantel in my living room, a tangible reminder of new beginnings. Vanessa visited regularly, sometimes with Elliot, sometimes alone. During one visit, she noticed the painting. "Mom, this is beautiful," she said, studying it closely. "Did you just do this?" "Last week," I confirmed. "It's nothing special, just a view from my window." "It's more than that. You've captured something peaceful. I didn't know you could paint like this." Neither did I anymore. It's been decades since I really tried. She turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "What else don't I know about you?" The question hung between us, an invitation to deeper understanding. "Well," I said, smiling slightly, "I've booked a month-long stay in Seville for October. I'm going to live in the old city, take a painting course, and explore southern Spain." Her eyebrows shot up. "By yourself?" "Yes. It's something your father and I always talked about doing." I decided it was time. Instead of the concern or objection I might have expected before, Vanessa's face lit up. "That sounds amazing, Mom. I want to hear all about your plans." As I shared details of my upcoming adventure, I realized how much our relationship had evolved in just a few months. The tension and manipulation that had characterized our interactions around the house sale had transformed into genuine interest and support. 2 months into my new life, I hosted a small gathering at the cottage: Vanessa and Elliot, Barbara and her husband, Ricardo and his partner, and a few of my new neighbors. We sat in the backyard, strung with fairy lights for the occasion, eating and drinking and sharing stories as the evening cooled around us. Looking around the table at this unlikely collection of people from different parts of my life, I felt a sense of wholeness I hadn't experienced since Thomas died. I had created this home, this community, this moment of connection. Later, as the party wound down, Ricardo pulled me aside. "You seem happy, Margaret. The change suits you." "It does," I agreed. "I feel like I've found myself again." "Thomas would be pleased," he said gently. "Yes," I said, smiling at the memory of my husband. He always did say I was at my best when I was being true to myself. When everyone had gone and I was alone in my cottage, I sat in my studio in the moonlight, looking at the blank canvas on my easel. Tomorrow, I would begin a new painting. Perhaps a memory of the beach house, perhaps a scene from the life I was building now. Either way, it would be another step in this transformation journey. A journey that had begun with my daughter trying to force me to sell my house but had become something far more profound. The reclaiming of my full self. Autumn arrived, painting the oak trees around my cottage in fiery oranges and golds. My departure for Spain was just 2 weeks away, and I found myself caught in a whirlwind of preparations, arranging for Susan to water my plants, finalizing my itinerary, brushing up on my rusty Spanish. I had just returned from a shopping trip for travel essentials when my phone rang. It was Elliot. "Margaret," he began, his voice tight with tension. "We have a situation with the wedding. Carolyn has gone completely off the rails." "What's happened?" I asked, setting down my shopping bags. "She went to the pavilion yesterday and told Ricardo she's the new point of contact for all wedding decisions. She tried to change the menu, the table arrangements, even the ceremony timing, all without talking to us first. When Ricardo said he needed approval from Vanessa or me, she apparently had a meltdown." I sighed. I was afraid something like this might happen. "Where's Vanessa in all this?" "She's furious. She and her mother are barely speaking. Carolyn called her ungrateful for not appreciating her expertise in wedding planning." He paused. "But that's not why I'm calling. Carolyn is now threatening to withdraw their financial contribution if we don't let her take charge. It's a substantial amount, about $20,000. "I see." I sat down at my kitchen table, considering the implications. "And what do you and Vanessa want?" "We want our wedding, not whatever society event Carolyn is trying to create. But losing that money would hurt. We've already stretched ourselves thin with the down payment on the house." The house in Oak Ridge, a charming mid-century modern, that needed significant updates but had tremendous potential. I'd toured it with them last month, offering advice on which renovations would add the most value. They'd closed on it just last week. "Has Vanessa asked me to intervene?" I asked carefully. "No," Elliot admitted. "In fact, she specifically said she doesn't want to drag you into this. She says we need to handle it ourselves." I felt a surge of pride at my daughter's stance. She's right. I know. And normally I'd agree completely. But the timing is awful. With the house purchase and renovations, losing Carolyn's contribution would put us in a real bind. What Elliot wasn't saying directly was clear. He was hoping I would offer to replace his mother's financial contribution. The old Margaret might have jumped in immediately, offering to solve the problem with money. But that wasn't who I was anymore. "Elliot," I said gently, "what do you think Thomas would advise in this situation?" The question seemed to take him by surprise. I never knew your husband." "No, but you've heard about him from Vanessa, from me. What kind of man do you think he was?" Elliot was quiet for a moment. "From what I've gathered, he was principled, hardworking, someone who believed in earning what you have." "Yes," I smiled, thinking of Thomas. He had a saying, short-term pain for long-term gain. He believed that taking the easier path often led to greater difficulties down the road. "You're saying we should stand our ground with my mother. I'm saying you and Vanessa need to decide what matters most to you, your vision for your wedding and marriage, or avoiding conflict and financial pressure in the short term." Another long pause. "I understand. Whatever you decide, Elliot, I respect your process, and I'm here if either of you need to talk through options." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, resisting the urge to call Vanessa immediately. This was their challenge to navigate. Offering unsolicited advice or financial bailouts wouldn't serve their growth as a couple. 3 days later, Vanessa showed up at my cottage unannounced. Her eyes were red-rimmed and she looked exhausted. "Can I come in?" she asked. I ushered her inside and made tea while she sank onto my sofa. Neither of us spoke until I placed a steaming mug in front of her. "We called off the wedding," she said. Finally, I sat beside her, stunned. "What? Why?" "Not the marriage," she clarified quickly. "Just the big wedding at the pavilion. We're going to do something small instead. Just immediate family, maybe a few close friends. Justice of the peace, dinner afterward at that Italian restaurant Dad loved." "I see," I said carefully. "And this decision, it was mutual?" "Completely." A small smile touched her lips. "Elliot was actually the one who suggested it. He said he didn't want our marriage to start with so much stress and compromise." "How do you feel about it?" She took a sip of tea. "Relieved, honestly. The wedding was becoming this monster that had nothing to do with us or what we wanted. Carolyn was treating it like her personal showcase. You were somehow both the venue owner and mother of the bride, which made everything complicated. It just wasn't worth it. And the financial aspects? We lose the deposit on the pavilion, but we're saving so much on everything else that it still makes financial sense. And we're able to put that money toward the house renovations, which feels more meaningful in the long run." I studied my daughter's face. Despite her obvious fatigue, there was a calmness there I hadn't seen before. "You seem at peace with the decision." "I am. For the first time since we got engaged, I feel like we're making choices based on what's right for us, not what's expected." She looked up at me. "I think I finally understand what you've been doing these past few months." "What do you mean?" "Creating a life that reflects your true self, not someone else's idea of who you should be." She reached for my hand. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." I squeezed her fingers gently. "We all find our way in our own time." We talked for hours that afternoon. Vanessa shared more details about the confrontation with Carolyn, who had been furious about the change in plans. Elliot had stood firm, telling his mother that if she couldn't support their decisions, she didn't need to participate at all. "It was the first time I've ever seen him stand up to her," Vanessa said with a hint of pride. "It changed something between us. In a good way." As she was leaving, Vanessa hesitated at the door. "There is one thing, Mom. The small wedding. We're thinking of having it while you're in Spain. Would you consider delaying your trip? Just by a week or so? I really want you there." For a moment, I felt the old tug, the instinct to rearrange my plans to accommodate my daughter's needs. But this wasn't the same situation as before. This wasn't Vanessa expecting me to sacrifice for her convenience. This was a genuine request for me to be present at an important moment. "Of course I'll be there," I said. "Just let me know the date as soon as you decide. I can adjust my travel plans." The relief on her face was evident. "Thank you. It means a lot to both of us." After she left, I called the travel agency to inquire about changing my departure date. There would be a fee, but it was manageable. Some sacrifices were worth making. The key was understanding the difference between healthy compromise and self-erasure. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Amanda Prescott. "Margaret," she said, her voice unusually subdued. "I hope I'm not interrupting your evening?" "Not at all, Amanda. What can I do for you?" I wanted to apologize for Carolyn's behavior regarding the wedding. Elliot told us about their decision to change plans, and while Carolyn is having difficulty accepting it, Bernard and I understand. "I appreciate that," I said, surprised by her call. "The thing is," she continued hesitantly, "we've already paid a non-refundable deposit for the rehearsal dinner at La Mer. Since the wedding is now going to be so small, it seems a shame to waste it." I waited, curious where this was going. "Bernard and I were wondering if you might like to use the reservation and the deposit for a going-away dinner before your trip to Spain. Elliot mentioned you're leaving soon, and we thought, well, it might be a nice gesture of goodwill." The offer caught me off guard. Was this a genuine olive branch or another attempt at manipulation? Either way, I appreciated the effort. That's very thoughtful, Amanda. I'd be happy to accept. Wonderful. It's for October 1st at 7 p.m. We'd be delighted if you'd allow us to host you and anyone you'd like to bring. As I hung up, I smiled to myself. Life had a way of presenting unexpected tests and equally unexpected opportunities for grace. The small courtyard at La Mer restaurant glowed with soft lighting from paper lanterns strung overhead. I sat at the head of the table, surrounded by an unlikely gathering, Vanessa and Elliot to my right, Bernard and Amanda to my left, with Barbara and her husband, Ricardo and his partner, and Susan from next door filling the remaining seats. To new beginnings, Bernard proposed, raising his glass, and to Margaret's adventures in Spain. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt a wave of gratitude as I looked around the table. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this scene, this blend of my professional and personal worlds, this atmosphere of mutual respect and genuine goodwill. Amanda had outdone herself with the arrangements. The table was beautifully set with fresh flowers and candles, the menu personalized to include several of my favorite dishes. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful gesture Thomas would have appreciated, acknowledging a difficult situation with grace rather than lingering resentment. "We have a small gift for you," Amanda said as dessert was being served. She handed me an elegantly wrapped package. "Something for your travels." Inside was a leather-bound travel journal with my initials embossed on the cover, accompanied by a set of fine watercolor pencils. "Elliot mentioned you've taken up painting again," Bernard explained. "We thought you might enjoy capturing your impressions of Spain." "It's perfect," I said, genuinely touched. "Thank you both." As the evening progressed, conversation flowed easily. Ricardo shared amusing stories about pavilion weddings past, careful to change names to protect privacy. Barbara and Amanda discovered a shared interest in local politics. Susan charmed everyone with her straightforward humor. Watching this diverse group interact, I realized how much my life had expanded since the confrontation with Vanessa and Elliot about selling my house. What had begun as a painful power struggle had ultimately pushed me to reclaim parts of myself I'd nearly forgotten. My independence, my creativity, my capacity for new connections. "Mom," Vanessa said quietly during a lull in the conversation, "would you mind if I shared our news with everyone?" I nodded, curious. She smiled and took Elliot's hand. "We've set a date for our small wedding ceremony. October 12th, 2 weeks from today. Just a simple ceremony at the Oak Ridge Community Garden, followed by dinner at Marco's." "Marco's?" I asked, surprised. "Your father's favorite restaurant?" "It seemed fitting," she said. "A way to honor him, to have him be part of the day somehow." I felt tears spring to my eyes. "He would love that." "There's more," Elliot added. "We've decided to use the money we're saving on the wedding to finish the renovations on the house before we move in. Specifically, we're creating a guest suite. On the first floor," Vanessa leaned toward me. "We want you to feel welcome to stay with us whenever you like, Mom. Not because you need to, but because we'd love to have you." The thoughtfulness of their gesture, so different from their earlier presumptions about my needs, moved me deeply. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." "And," Vanessa continued, a hint of mischief in her eyes, "we thought maybe you could help us with some of the design decisions, since you have such experience with renovations." "I'd be honored," I said, recognizing this invitation for what it was, not an assumption that I had nothing better to do with my time, but a genuine request to share my knowledge and be part of their new home in a meaningful way. After dinner, as we waited for the valet to bring our cars, Bernard pulled me aside. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that Carolyn sends her regrets for not attending tonight. This situation with the wedding has been challenging for her." "I understand," I said. "Change is difficult for all of us, in different ways." He nodded. "She and I had a long talk this morning. She's beginning to see that her approach wasn't working, for anyone, including herself. Elliot standing his ground made an impression. "He's a good man," I said. "I'm proud of the way he and Vanessa have handled this situation." "As am I," Bernard agreed. "And I'm grateful for your role in it. You could have intervened, used your ownership of the pavilion to force concessions, but you didn't. You let them find their own solution." "They needed to," I said simply. Bernard studied me thoughtfully. "Thomas must have been an exceptional man." "He was. Why do you say that?" "Because he helped shape you into the woman you are. Someone who understands the difference between supporting and rescuing." He smiled slightly. "It's a distinction Carolyn and I are still learning." As I drove home that night, I reflected on Bernard's words. Thomas had indeed understood that distinction clearly. "Love without smothering," he used to say. "Support without solving." I'd forgotten those principles after he died, falling into the trap of trying to anticipate and fulfill Vanessa's every need, rather than letting her develop her own strengths. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. I helped Vanessa and Elliot choose paint colors and fixtures for their renovations, packed for Spain, and finalized arrangements for my month abroad. Susan promised to send me regular updates on neighborhood happenings, and Ricardo assured me the pavilion would run smoothly in my absence. The morning of Vanessa's wedding dawned clear and crisp. I wore a simple blue dress that Thomas had always loved, with his mother's pearl necklace, something old, and new earrings I'd bought specifically for the occasion. The Oak Ridge Community Garden was glorious in its fall colors, leaves crunching, underfoot as the small gathering assembled. No more than 20 people stood in a semicircle around Vanessa and Elliot as they exchanged heartfelt vows beneath an arbor draped with autumn flowers. What struck me most was the joy radiating from my daughter's face, pure, unfiltered happiness that had nothing to do with elaborate decorations or impressing guests. This was the wedding she truly wanted, rooted in genuine connection rather than expectation or display. Even Carolyn seemed affected by the sincerity of the occasion. She stood beside Bernard, tearful but smiling, her usual polish softened by evident emotion. At Marco's afterward, surrounded by the rich aromas of Italian cuisine that Thomas had so loved, I found myself seated between Vanessa and Carolyn. "He would have loved this," I said to Vanessa, surveying the simple celebration. "Your father always appreciated authenticity above all else." "I know," she said, squeezing my hand. "I kept thinking of him during the ceremony, what he would say, how he would laugh at certain moments. He's part of you," I said. "In your strength, your determination, even your stubbornness." She smiled. "And in my business sense, apparently. Elliot and I have been looking at an investment property near our new house. Nothing fancy, just a small duplex we could renovate and rent out." "Following in my footsteps? More like creating our own path, but with the wisdom you've shared?" She glanced at her watch. "You should probably leave soon if you want to finish packing. Your flight's early tomorrow." "Are you trying to get rid of me already?" I teased. "Never," she said, her expression turning serious. "But I know how important this trip is to you. Dad would want you to go, to have this adventure for both of you." As I prepared to leave, Vanessa walked me to my car. "I have something for you," she said, handing me a small package. "Don't open it until you're on the plane." "What is it?" "Just a little something for your travels." She hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mom. Not just for today, but for everything. These past few months. For showing me who you really are, and helping me remember who I want to be." The next morning, as my plane lifted off, I opened Vanessa's gift. Inside was a small, beautifully bound book. On the first page, in her neat handwriting, "For Mom, who taught me that it's never too late to rewrite your story. I can't wait to read the next chapter. All my love, Vanessa." The remaining pages were blank, waiting to be filled with the experiences and insights of my journey ahead. I settled back in my seat, watching the coastline recede below me. The house I'd been pressured to sell had led me to discover not just a new home, but a new version of myself, and unexpectedly, a new relationship with my daughter. As the plane banked toward the east, toward Spain and the adventure waiting there, I opened Thomas's journal and began to write. Today, I am flying to Seville, my love. Our dream, finally realized. But the journey began long before this flight. It started the day our daughter tried to make me sell our house, never suspecting that I owned the very venue where she planned to begin her new life. Sometimes the most unexpected catalysts lead us exactly where we need to go. Seville embraced me with warm October sunshine and the scent of orange blossoms. My apartment in the historic Santa Cruz district was exactly as I'd imagined, a second-floor walk-up with whitewashed walls, terracotta tiles, and a small balcony overlooking a cobblestone street. From my window, I could see the spires of the cathedral and hear street musicians playing flamenco in the nearby plaza. During my first week, I settled into a pleasant routine. Mornings at a local cafe with strong coffee and a sketchbook, afternoons exploring the city's gardens and museums, evenings sampling tapas at different neighborhood bars. Twice a week, I attended a watercolor class taught by a local artist in his sun-drenched studio. It was in this class that I met Helena, an elegant woman in her 70s from Buenos Aires, who had moved to Seville after her husband's death, 5 years earlier. I came for a 2-week vacation, she told me over sangria after our third class, and simply never left. Something about this city heals the soul. I can understand that, I said, watching the sunset paint the buildings in gold. It has a magical quality. And what brought you here, Margaret? Just tourism? I found myself telling Helena about Thomas, about our dream of spending time in Spain. And then, surprising myself, I told her about Vanessa, the house, the pavilion, the whole complicated story. Helena listened attentively, her dark eyes thoughtful. When I finished, she raised her glass. To second acts, she said. And to standing, your ground. You approve? I asked, smiling. Absolutely. Too many of us allow our children to diminish us as we age, to reduce us to a role rather than a person. She shrugged eloquently. My Eduardo tried it after his father died. Suddenly I was to be managed, advised, directed. I booked a trip to Spain the next day. And he learned his lesson? Eventually. Her eyes twinkled. After I bought an apartment, here without telling him. Now he visits twice a year, brings my grandchildren. We have a much better relationship, as equals. Helena introduced me to her circle of expatriate friends, a diverse group of retirees from across Europe and the Americas who had chosen Seville for their next chapter. They welcomed me warmly, including me in their gatherings, showing me hidden corners of the city tourists rarely found. Among them was Gabriel, a retired architecture professor from Portugal with kind eyes and a ready laugh. He began joining me for morning sketching sessions, offering gentle suggestions to improve my technique. Our friendship developed easily, built on shared interests and mutual respect. 3 weeks into my stay, I received an email from Ricardo. With unexpected news, Carolyn Prescott had approached him about hosting a charity event at the pavilion. She specifically asked if you might be willing to display some of your artwork at the event, he wrote. It's for the Children's Hospital Foundation. Given your interest in supporting literacy programs, I thought you might want to consider it. I sat back, surprised. This was the last thing I'd expected from Carolyn, an acknowledgement of my artistic pursuits, an invitation to participate in her world as a peer rather than an aging in-law to be managed. Later that day, I received a message from Vanessa. Mom, have you heard from Carolyn about the charity event? She's actually being thoughtful about it, not pushy. Elliot is in shock. I smiled as I typed my response. Ricardo mentioned it. What do you think I should do? Her reply came quickly. I think You should say yes. Your paintings are beautiful. People should see them. And Carolyn is really trying. In her way. That evening, during a group dinner at a local restaurant, I mentioned the situation to Helena and Gabriel. The universe works in mysterious ways, Helena said. This woman who dismissed you is now seeking your participation. It's a form of recognition. Gabriel nodded. And an opportunity to show a different side of yourself to people who thought they knew you. So, you think I should agree? I asked. I think, Gabriel said carefully, that generosity toward those who have wronged us is never wasted. Whether or not they deserve it. The next day, I emailed Ricardo, agreeing to display 3 of my paintings at Carolyn's event, scheduled for the week after my return. Then I threw myself into painting with renewed purpose, completing 2 new pieces specifically for the showing. As my month in Seville drew to a close, I found myself reluctant to leave. I had discovered a community here, a rhythm to my days that nourished my creative spirit. On my final evening, Gabriel invited me to dinner at his favorite restaurant, tucked away on a quiet street near the river. I have a confession, he said as we lingered over dessert. I was in Florida last year, visiting my cousin in Palm Beach. I attended a wedding at your pavilion. I looked at him in surprise. Really? What a coincidence. Indeed, it's a beautiful property. You should be proud. But what I remember most was seeing a woman sitting alone on the terrace, watching the celebration with such quiet attention. I noticed her because she seemed both part of the event and separate from it. His eyes met mine. I believe it was you. The memory came back to me instantly. A spring wedding last year, when I had slipped away from Ricardo's office to watch the celebration from a distance. That's remarkable. Life has strange patterns, Gabriel said. Perhaps we were meant to meet again. Do you believe in that sort of thing? I asked. Fate? I believe in recognizing opportunities when they present themselves. He hesitated, then continued. I'll be visiting my daughter in New York this December. It's not so far from Connecticut. I'd like that, I said, realizing I meant it. Very much. The morning of my departure, Gabriel came to help me with my luggage. At the curb, he handed me a small wrapped package. Something to remember Seville by, he said. Open it when you're home. On the flight back, I thought about the ripple effects of the past 6 months, how Vanessa's attempt to control my life had set in motion a series of changes I could never have anticipated. My cottage, my renewed passion for painting, my new friendships, even this tentative connection with Gabriel. None of it would have happened if I had simply acquiesced to Vanessa's plans. 2 days after my return, still jet-lagged but happy to be in my cozy cottage, I opened Gabriel's gift. It was a small, exquisite watercolor of the view from my apartment in Seville, painted with delicate precision. On the back he had written, "For Margaret, who knows that every ending is also a beginning." The charity event at the pavilion was scheduled for the following weekend. Vanessa helped me select and frame my paintings, 3 landscapes from Connecticut, and 2 scenes from Seville. "These are really good, Mom," she said, studying a painting of the oak trees outside my cottage. "You've found your style." "It's still evolving," I said. "That's the interesting part." Vanessa looked at me thoughtfully. "You've changed since Spain. There's something lighter about you." "I've made some good friends there," I said, choosing my words carefully, "including a very kind Portuguese architect named Gabriel." A smile spread across her face. "Tell me more about this architect." As I shared stories about Gabriel and my other new friends, I realized how much my relationship with Vanessa had evolved. 6 months ago, I would have hesitated to mention a male friend, fearing her judgment or concern. Now we were talking as adults, as women with independent lives who could share confidences. The night of the charity event, I arrived at the pavilion feeling strangely nervous. My paintings were displayed in the entryway, beautifully lit and presented. Ricardo had arranged everything perfectly. Carolyn approached almost immediately, elegant in a black cocktail dress. "Margaret, thank you so much for participating." She gestured toward my artwork. "These are quite impressive. I had no idea you were so talented." "Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you for including me. It's a worthy cause." She hesitated, then added, "I've been meaning to tell you. The cottage suits you. It has a charm the beach house lacked." Coming from Carolyn, this was high praise indeed. "I'm very happy there," I said simply. "Yes," she said softly. "I can see that now." Later that evening, I stood on the terrace where Gabriel had seen me a year earlier. The pavilion glowed with light, the sound of music and laughter spilling out into the night. I thought about how differently I felt now, standing in the same spot, no longer an observer on the periphery, but fully engaged in my own life, with all its unexpected turns. Ricardo joined me, offering a glass of champagne. "To your successful exhibition," he said. "3 of your paintings have sold already." "What?" I was genuinely shocked. "Who would buy them?" "Collectors who recognize talent," he said with a smile. "You've created something beautiful, Margaret. People respond to that." As we stood watching the moonlight on the water, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. My daughter's attempt to force me to sell my house had ultimately led me not to loss, but to expansion of my horizons, my confidence, my capacity for joy. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as challenges. Sometimes we need to be pushed to the edge before we remember how to fly. Winter settled over Connecticut, transforming my cottage neighborhood into a postcard scene of snow-laden oak trees and wreaths on doors. Inside, my studio buzzed with activity as I prepared for something I'd never imagined. My first small gallery showing in New Hartford, scheduled for early February. The success of my paintings at Carolyn's charity event had led to an introduction to a gallery owner who had been intrigued by my fresh perspective and mature execution, as she put it. 3 months ago, I would have dismissed the possibility out of hand. Now I embraced it, spending hours in my studio perfecting a collection that told the story of my transformation. From the beach house to the cottage, from Connecticut to Seville, from constraint to freedom. On a snowy December afternoon, Vanessa arrived carrying a large, flat package wrapped in brown paper. "Early Christmas gift," she explained, setting it carefully against the wall. Elliot and I couldn't wait. I unwrapped it to find a beautifully framed black and white photograph of the beach house. Not a recent image, but one from decades ago, when Thomas and I had just begun renovations. We stood on the unfinished deck, arms around each other, tools scattered around us, laughing at whoever was behind the camera. "I found it in a box of Dad's old things," Vanessa said. "I thought it belonged here, in your studio." I touched the image gently, memories flooding back. "It's perfect. Thank you." "We're learning," she said simply. "About balance, about respect, about seeing people for who they are, not who we need them to be." Later that day, I received a video call from Gabriel, who was visiting his daughter, in New York as planned. We spoke for over an hour, sharing details of our days, making plans for his visit to Connecticut the following week. His presence in my life, unexpected, undemanded, freely chosen, was yet another gift born from the very conflict that had once threatened my autonomy. As Christmas approached, my cottage filled with surprising visitors. Susan organized a neighborhood caroling group that serenaded me one evening. Barbara and her husband brought homemade eggnog. Ricardo and his partner delivered a gourmet basket from the pavilion's executive chef. And most surprisingly, Bernard and Carolyn arrived with a peace offering, tickets to the symphony for when Gabriel visited. "We'd love to have you both for Dinner afterward, Carolyn said, with only the slightest hint of her former imperious manner. I understand Gabriel is quite knowledgeable about architecture. Bernard would enjoy the conversation. On Christmas Eve, I hosted dinner for Vanessa and Elliot in my cottage for the first time. The space was small compared to the beach house, but filled with warmth and the aromas of Thomas's favorite holiday recipes. After dinner, as we sat by the fireplace with mulled wine, Vanessa handed me another gift, a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny house. "For your new beginning," she said, "and for teaching me what matters." "It's beautiful," I said, fastening it around my wrist. "But this journey wasn't about the house in the end, either the one I sold or the one I bought." "What was it about?" Elliot asked. I considered the question carefully. "It was about remembering who I am. Not just as your mother," I smiled at Vanessa, "or Thomas's widow, but as Margaret. A woman with her own dreams, her own strengths, her own path." After they left, I sat alone by the fire, Thomas's journal, open beside me. The pages that had been blank 6 months ago were now filled with reflections, sketches, stories from my time in Spain and my evolving life in Connecticut. On a fresh page, I began to write, "The house that Vanessa tried to take from me became, ironically, the key to my freedom. By forcing me to defend my right to self-determination, she inadvertently pushed me to reclaim not just my property, but my entire sense of self. I've been thinking about cycles lately, how we sometimes need to lose something to gain something greater, how endings create space for beginnings, how conflict can lead to deeper understanding if we let it. Thomas always said that life's challenges were opportunities in disguise. I didn't fully comprehend what he meant until this year. Now I understand that resistance builds strength, that boundaries create clarity, that standing firm can be the greatest act of love, both for oneself and for others. The woman who left. The beach house is not the same woman who writes these words tonight. I am more myself than I have been in years. Artist, investor, friend, mother, and perhaps, someday soon, partner again. Vanessa, too, has changed. In losing the battle for control over my life, she gained something far more valuable, the opportunity to know her mother as a complete person, not just a role. Our relationship has deepened in ways I never anticipated. Perhaps that is the final irony. In trying to force me into the neat box of elderly dependence, Vanessa ultimately freed us both. I closed the journal and added another log to the fire. Outside, soft snow continued to fall, transforming the landscape into something new and beautiful. Like my life, reinvented, reclaimed, reimagined. After the day my daughter forced me to sell my house but had no idea I owned the venue. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.